Winning margins in the competitive world of Formula One are normally measured in seconds, and of course pole position can be decided by thousandths. Very occasionally, usually due to wet conditions, they get measured in minutes. But very, very rarely, an entirely different unit is required. This is a short view back to the past to when an F1 driver won by 2 laps.
Gentlemen, a short view back to the past.
Now, it's probably fair to say that Damon Hill's 1995 season had not been a good one, and in fact it ultimately led to him losing his drive, although he didn't know it at the time. Despite the speed of his Williams-Renault FW17, Hill had not been able to stop Mark Schumacher and Benetton taking both titles, largely due to strategic blunders, hello Ferrari circa 2022, and some driver errors as well. By the time the field arrived for the final round at Adelaide for the Australian Grand Prix, both titles had been wrapped up, and quite amazingly, neither technical director Patrick Head nor chief designer Adrian Newey could even be bothered to attend the race. Nevertheless, Hill qualified on pole ahead of teammate David Coulthard, with newly crowned double world champion Schumacher in third. 0.8 of a second covered the top 5 cars in qualifying, so that didn't really suggest that we were looking at a race that could break records in terms of massive winning margins. This weekend was also significant, partly because it was the final round ever to be held at Adelaide for Formula One. A bit of a shame, because I always thought it was a rather cool track and a nice place to finish the season, but also because this event got 520,000 spectators across the weekend, which is still believed to be a record, and more than 200,000 packed themselves in for race day. Those fans got to see Coulthard beat Hill off the line, so it's still a Williams 1-2, but effectively in the wrong order. That was corrected when Coulthard had his incredibly embarrassing gaffe coming into the pit lane. I'm sure you've all seen it. Comes into the pits, locks up and goes into the barrier and breaks his front suspension. Schumacher and Jean Alesi's Ferrari became Hill's closest challengers, but that was stopped when Alesi inexplicably drove into the Benetton at the end of the main straight when Schumacher was overtaking the Ferrari. Both cars tried to continue but were soon out. It was typical of a race that became one of attrition. 14 of the 22 starters failed to make the finish. And one of the saddest retirements, and one of the most significant, was Gerhard Berger when his Ferrari's V12 retired. Now, the reason for that was that it was the last time a Ferrari V12 engine started a World Championship Grand Prix. So they moved to V10s after that, V8s, and now we're into turbos, etc. So 1995 Australian Grand Prix, a little bit of history there, the last Ferrari V12 F1 start. Now, Hill was already a minute ahead of Johnny Herbert's Benetton, an enormous margin by contemporary F1 standards, when the Benetton's drive shaft failed. So with all the quick cars out and just 12 laps to go, Hill now had a lead of a lap over Olivier Panis's Ligier. But near the end, Panis's Mugen Honda started to smoke. The Frenchman backed off to nurse the car home, and just a couple of laps from the end, he moved aside to allow Hill through. Obviously, that would be one less lap for him to have to cover. Hill crossed the line to complete 81 laps, the only driver to do so, with Panis second on 79 laps. And that was despite a particularly long pit stop at his final stop when one of the wheels got stuck. Had Williams been under pressure, they might have lost the race, but it made no difference to Hill's race whatsoever. To underline that this was a race of attrition, third place fell to Gianni Morbidelli's Footwork, a team that had managed 1 point in the previous 16 races of the season. Now, given the lap times at Adelaide, Hill's winning margin equates to roughly 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Now, to put that into perspective, the average winning margin for the 2021 F1 season was 14.8 seconds, so a completely different magnitude altogether. Now, the World Championship Grand Prix had been won by 2 laps once before, when Jackie Stewart won the 1969 Spanish Grand Prix. And the longest in terms of time duration in the winning margin is Sterling Moss's 1958 Portuguese Grand Prix, which he won by 5 minutes 12.75 seconds over title rival Mike Hawthorn, who did ironically go on to win that year's world title. But most of the biggest gaps in F1 history do come from the 1950s and the 1960s. To have a 2-lap winning margin in the 1990s was truly remarkable, and it seems very unlikely that we'll see a repeat anytime soon. And that's even taking into account Max Verstappen and Red Bull's recent domination. If you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe. Do take a look at other videos on Motorsport TV, and let us know in the comments if there are any other stories you'd like us to take a look at in future.